open up the conversation with what you are seeing in the industry right now. Any glaring trends, anything that's happening that you're seeing on your end of what's been going on with writers, what they're submitting, what's popping. Just give us kind of an overall view of that.
I've been pretty new to, well, I don't know how new it is anymore. I've been here for 7 months, so it's been, for the first few months at a job, I feel like it's always catching up, so I'm now caught up, and now I can finally actually get into all the other stuff. In terms of trends, I think, working with the director, so before this I worked with Noah Hawley, so I've now worked with 2 directors. It's very specific in what we're looking for, right? There's always like a mandate, what their brand is, and so I can only really speak to what I'm looking for with her. And so that's a lot of female-driven stuff, things that are very left of center, things that feel like really weird, and so that's kind of all I see, which is amazing for me because that's the kind of stuff I love. So yeah, it's things that, I feel like grounded sci-fi is like the theme. Everyone's always talking about the grounded sci-fi stuff. So I think also what's important though is we just see so much material, so how do you stand out kind of in that genre, in that space?
For me, representing writers and directors with more of a focus on, say, writers than directors, I think it's about always trying to introduce something new rather than doing a lesser than version of what's already been done. I think there's a lot of opportunities in TV, but on the feature side, I think the bar continues to be higher and higher. And I think the idea is, how do you make something undeniable? How do you bring urgency to a project? How do you add something new to the conversation rather than do a lesser than version of what's already been done? So I think for me, it's like, I'm tougher on my clients more so than ever, and I'm happy to kill ideas if it just doesn't fit in a box. I think it's about the intersection of the artistry of it, but being mindful of the business side. Not chasing the trends per se, but really delivering something that everyone's going to be like, wow, that's cool. That's something that we have to make. And I think that's, again, a higher bar, but it kind of makes the whole process a little bit more interesting because the payoff is certainly there.
So one of the things that I do for my clients is I think that we're getting to the place where we can have more voices and more very specific shows. So if you have a very specific thing to say about any part of sort of the human experience, there is an opportunity for that. And one of the things I help my clients do is make sure that they're not ostracizing any eyeballs from that. So I'm making sure that they're being very intentional in what they say, and what they say is the same for as many people as possible, because that audience, the numbers are harder to get, and so you really want to maintain who you can get when you get it by having like a really tight internal world that's not off-putting to people who could potentially really be into your show.
I mean, to piggyback off that, I was going to say the same thing, essentially. It's basically, you want to make sure everything you write is uniquely you, but at the same time is universally relatable. I think in stand-up, they always say, the more personal you are, the more universal it gets. If you look at what's out there right now, my favorite show right now is like something like Special on Netflix. It's like super specific, but at the same time it's highly enjoyable, and every struggle he goes through, in some way you can kind of relate to find your own personal life. To answer the question, as a whole, I think that the industry is going a little lighter. I think it's because the road we're going so dark. So whereas like a few years ago, everyone wants a Breaking Bad, but I don't think that's necessarily the case right now. So you want to do something serious, but at the same time you have to find some way to inject levity and humor into it to make it more approachable.
A lot of meta-commentary as well. The humor in the meta-commentary is like that's something I see going on too.
Yeah. Do you guys feel like we're still kind of in the TV golden age, or are you seeing more opportunities for new writers to come on the feature side? Where are you kind of on that?
I think there's more opportunity in TV to advance a little bit quicker. Features tend to be such a long game. Like it just takes longer to put up a feature than it does to go through a television cycle. So there's a little bit more movement there, but like if you hit as that feature, as you were saying, feature has like a higher bar, but if you hit and you can do it, you pretty much can make a career on that.
for me, my background in the 7 years I've been doing this has mostly been on the feature side. I would say 2019 was the year where I was like, okay, let me try to really explore the waters in terms of developing TV writers, really go deep into the staffing, see if we could set up shows and things like that. And now it's like really into it. It's kind of exciting. It's still something I'm definitely really learning, but yeah, the opportunity is certainly there on the TV side in a way that maybe it's just not quite on the feature side.
Yeah, just kind of adding on, I've always been on the feature side actually up until now, where we are focusing much more on the TV side, and it's a whole new world, which is exciting. Like there, of course, is a lot of overlap, but it is just fascinating that it's its own beast. They're kind of so you know, I'm trying to tackle all of that, and I think what's interesting is for features. Yes, it's just a slower process. You write something, you send it out, someone will respond, there's development, there are rewrites, there's all of that, but I think with TV it's like yes or no, are we making this or not, and if not, sorry, put it away. So that's kind of interesting. I think that's why it moves a lot faster, and I think even within that there's writer's room, right? So there's so many more opportunities for other voices to come in. So in that sense, like yes, I think the TV is sort of still in the golden age, and
It's great.
I don't know, maybe it'll implode, but we'll see.
There's definitely a lot more buyers right now for television, so that's exciting. I think this is the busiest I've ever been starting the year off. Usually there's like a little lull before everything picks up, but I think we're going to break this holiday season.
In terms of all the new streaming services, those are the new buyers, or are there other people even coming into the game, different financiers, different people that you wouldn't expect to be involved in film and TV?
I think it really just comes down to the streamers that's really launching right now. And I think TV is changing with things like Quibi and Netflix and going non-traditional, like things that are happening in 10, 15-minute formats. Like people are just buying all kinds of things and all sorts of content that usually would not have existed years ago. Yeah.
Because I know it's getting a little rowdy downstairs, so we'll speak up in case anyone in the back can't hear us. Alex, you have a very interesting job, and one that I'm so thrilled is a part of the industry. How are you keeping people in check? And I mean, how do you bring that conversation to someone who might not be as aware of the sensitivity that's needed behind a project? How do you frame that conversation, and what advice do you give to writers in terms of making sure that their content is going to be okay by someone like you?
So it's definitely a conversation. Like right now, all of my clients approach me. There are people who are already invested in making sure that what they're saying is truly what they intended to say, because it can be very hard to see. Like I think one of the biggest things that I do for people is I put their project in sort of a more holistic view. Like I step back and I say, okay, you wrote a horror movie and your storyline may be great internally for your story, but your story doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists amongst all of the other horror stories we've ever told. And so what you think maybe works really well in your story that you've told as like a really individual thing for a character might actually be recreating stories that other people have already told, and you're borrowing from their baggage, you're borrowing from their language, because film does have a language, and we're now in a place where it's pretty well developed, and your audiences know that language. So they're not dumb, they're gonna be thinking about all these things, and so part of what I do is put stories in sort of a broader context and sort of say, think about it from this perspective. Think about if there's one line. So one woman came up to me, she got really quiet, she goes, I used to really enjoy watching movies, and my husband had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and now every single movie that calls somebody cancer in a movie hits me, and I can't watch things anymore.
Like you're such a cancer.
Right, like you are a cancer, and she goes, but they're not. They're just not like a cancer. And she just gave me this look, and I mean, putting that into context for somebody, because that's such a small thing. But the question then becomes, do you want to, if knowing that there are people who react like this to this line, you as the writer get to make the choice whether or not you want to take that out or keep it, or if you think that metaphor is strong enough. I'm just there to be consider that there are people out there like this, who believe this, and it gets more and more important as you kind of get out to more and more bigger topics, like addressing racism, sexism, homophobia, and ableism are sort of the main umbrellas that we're looking at to see, have you considered from this perspective? But it's not a one-to-one, like I'm not saying you cannot do this. My job is to say, here's why people are going to respond this way. Here's why certain people think this. It's up to you how you want to address that. If that's what you want to say, if that's how you wanted to say it, it's my job to either tell you, like, okay, what commentary you're trying to make, here's how you can do it. So it's not just me telling you you can or can't do something, it's me trying to kind of broaden your horizons and understand your intent may not be relayed the way you think. Let's make sure everybody is getting your intent in a really appropriate way, the way that you want.
Are there some people, because I mean, especially knowing comedy, people are like, well, some things are just funny and we can't be too sensitive about this stuff because some of this lends to comedy. I know I'm a stand-up comedian and I know a lot of people are like, I can't say anything anymore. Do you get blowback? I mean, do you get people who are like, no, it's funny, or like, because of that?
Well, usually my favorite tactic to take on that is like explain the joke to me. Like if you think it's funny, I'm telling you I don't understand the joke. It may be funny, I may literally not understand the joke. Explain it to me. And the thing is, you'll hit a point with people, well, they'll start getting quieter, and you just keep asking why. And they will not go further from the point because that's the point where they realize, oh, the joke I said was built on a foundation of racism, sexism, homophobia, or ableism, and I have now hit the point where I'm uncomfortable continuing doing this like a joke. So like I try and actually get people to do that work and try and like just think about what you said, and now I'm just going to pretend that you're on the other side of this. Is a lot of what I do is kind of talking to people, workshopping it, because what I deeply need you to do is understand why somebody would be hurt by what this is saying. Because what this is at its core is harm reduction. I want you to understand why, and then you can make an informed choice whether or not that stays in your movie because that's what you want to say, or if you realize, oh, that's not what I wanted to say to either this group of people or anybody. So I just change it within the context of the scene because I'm not really making big story arc changes. Most of the changes that I'm making, unless there's something very endemic to the script, are typically like, let's just tweak the conversation a little bit. Like you could not say that, or you could say it in a different way and it has a completely different meaning. So
Awesome.
yeah.
So this next question is for our two talent managers, talent and literary managers. What are some unique writing attributes and narratives that get people noticed these days, and how do these people shine in the meetings with you?
I think I'll speak to something that maybe goes beyond the scope of that question, but something that I've noticed in my time as a literary manager. It's great to be super talented on the page, but I think some very talented people often lack the soft skills. And it's like, okay, you got a great script, and you got a meeting with some really cool people. Show up on time, be a decent person. Don't follow up 50 times via email if they give you their email address. It's like, I've seen a lot of very talented writers and directors self-sabotage in a way because they just don't navigate the waters correctly. And it's almost like the money and the project, the glory, it's all there for the taking, but they kind of get in the way of themselves. And you think, like, this is something easy, this is something that's correctable, but like, sometimes it's not. So I think staying mindful of that, it's great to be super talented on the page, but if you're not a decent human being, if you don't put yourself in the best position to just be like, hey, I'm on time, hey, I'm kind, hey, I'm following proper protocol in terms of communication, that could be very detrimental to your career.
Especially, I mean,
I don't know if that clapping was for me.
I mean, I've heard a lot, especially for TV writers' room, that sometimes it's not so much about your sample, it's about, do these showrunners want to hang out with you for 8 to 9 hours a day? Is that something you look for? Like, can I get this person staffed?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes beyond TV too. Like, I got a phone call from a producer. They knew that I was friends with this writer, wasn't a client, and they're like, hey, like, the head of the company's not really vibing with them, like, but we want to do this deal, like, do you vouch for them? And it's like, these are nerdy-ish guys that maybe, like, didn't know how to socialize, and I mean, like, nothing wrong with that, but maybe they just didn't present themselves the best way that day. Great writers, but, like, that was enough to kind of put the deal, maybe in limbo, and I vouched for them and they got the deal, but, like, that that stayed with me, and that's kind of crazy. Like, yes, be a great writer, be undeniable on the page, but also just, be the best version of yourself. Really kind of put as much effort into that side of things, because I do think it's important.
I agree with that. We always bring it up to new writers when we meet with them. It's that there's 3 elements we always look at when we decide we want to sign somebody. One is if they can write, right? That's always the most important thing. If you can write, that's helpful. That's a skill you need to be successful. 2, what? I'm trying to avoid the speaker.
Yeah.
Second,
Can everyone hear David?
It's a bit quiet.
Great. A bit quiet. Just a little louder.
all right. And then 2 is that you have to be personable, like Dan was mentioning. You have to go in. They have to know that they can hang out with you, especially in TV. They are stuck with you essentially for 20 to 30 weeks at a time. And for sometimes 12, 14-hour days. They don't want to be around people that are miserable. And 3 is if you have the sample that's correct for the project you really want. So if you evaluate yourself in those 3 elements, and you're great in all of them, then you'll be successful.
Have there been any horror stories of writers or talent who have done something that you're like, hey, yo, or something that really got your attention in the wrong way that you can advise against?
No, but not at the company I'm at now. Not with my own personal clients, but I've worked at other places, and you can look me up and probably figure it out. I think for me, the lesson, I'm not going to go into it, but the lesson is, I'm never going to keep a client that's making a ton of money if they're a bad person. If it's someone that people don't want to work with, someone that makes people feel uncomfortable, someone that even pushes the envelope in any way, it's just not worth it. There are easier ways to make a living than to be a literary manager. I'd like to hope that I can just do it the right way by being a decent person, and the people that reflect my company also be decent people. So I think that lesson has definitely always stayed with me, and I think maybe that company kept that client a little bit too long, but then it became hey, everybody knows, so it's time for them to go. I don't see that really happening much these days.
From my time as an executive, because now I work for myself, writers, no matter how disappointed you are if a deal falls apart or if you put in a lot of work and then something doesn't happen, do not write your executives an angry email about how disappointed they are in you that deal fell apart. Because when you do that, the exec then can no longer put you forward for jobs because you basically told that executive you don't trust them. And I don't know how you rebuild that trust afterwards. And also there's so much stuff that went into everything failing that you cannot be sure that you got the whole scope of what happened. And you may be making some accusations that are not based in truth or facts. So just always try and just be kind of not necessarily upbeat, but don't burn a bridge if you won't have to, is what I'm saying. Because we like to advocate for writers, even if those deals fall apart. If we got to the point where we're trying to negotiate a deal for you, the likelihood of me being to another exec, hey, you should definitely check out this person, we almost went into something with them, it fell apart because of other reasons, but they're great. That's what we love to do, and that's what we do with each other, is we give each other the heads up, so don't burn bridges that you don't have to.
Yeah, just kind of adding on, execs talk, so know that. But I think, one thing I have witnessed a lot is ego, and it's really hard. Being a writer honestly, it's the toughest. It really is. I don't know how you guys do it. It's bow down. But I think it's just being okay with taking notes, right? That's part of the process. Rewriting is part of the job. And I've just worked with a couple of people that you just hit a point where they're I don't want to take notes. So it just becomes, you can't hit a brick wall because it is a collaborative process at the end of the day. And hopefully good execs want to actually make the best version of the project. So hopefully it's not coming from a bad place. It's never, meant to, at the end of the day, everyone wants to make the project, right? So I think with thinking about that and letting ego go a little bit and being okay to sort of just work together. And I think the other thing is also being okay in a room to say, okay, yes, let me listen to what your notes are, and you don't always have to take them. Like, that's okay too. But I think over the phone, in a room, just being gracious again, and just listening, because you never know when someone will say something that might spark something else, right? So I just think that's such an important part of the process, and you can't let your ego again get in the way.
Listen to the note behind the note, but also we know every time when you intentionally poorly incorporate a note into a draft. Like, we know every time.
An easy fix, you mean?
Well, no, because there's sometimes when writers will specifically, like, they won't agree with the note, but they'll feel the need to take it, but then they'll intentionally sabotage the note in the next draft. And, like, we know that you do that. And, like, the thing is, your development execs may or may not agree with the note that they were forced to give you in the first place. But if you do that, you undermine our ability to be like, hey, so this note that y'all fought for that we knew was bad, well, we can't do anything because we can't actually assess the note based on the really intentionally bad way that it's incorporated. So just like, no, we've seen all of the tricks.
On that topic, I just want to mention that as your rep, we are on your team. So we give you a no's because we really believe you can make this a great project, and we want to make sure it goes out and gets made. If you don't like the note, just know that we took our time out of our day to read it, and then thought about it, and then gave you something said something to you on the phone. Like, we don't have to do that.
Yeah, David's points totally. Yeah, wow, okay. So I've worked with writers in the past that have just been very defensive, and it's like, there's a disconnect. We're on the same team. We have the same goal. Like, I'm very mindful to not be hurtful, to not feel like I'm attacking or putting anyone down. Like, it's okay. Like, here are my thoughts. You can digest them however you'd like, but it's a conversation. Everything I say is probably within a gray area that like should lead to further dialogue, but it's not like, hey, do this. Maybe if it's a typo or something like that, but like, I don't know. I think it's about, if you're not repped for people in the audience, when you meet with managers, getting a sense of what their style is, like, notes should be a conversation. Notes should be a process where you're working together as a team. It shouldn't be like, hey, this script sucks, fix this. Like, that's not helpful. That's not what you should be looking for.
Perfect segue. Reps. How do we get them? What gets you noticed? Should we shoot a short film? Should we do improv experience? What can writers do? Should they have a sample of every different genre? What on the exec side and what on the manager side are you seeing, and what are you drawn to in a potential new client or someone that you potentially now want to work with?
I like to know who you are and what you're trying to say in every piece you write. For me, most important is when I read it, at the end of it, I not only want to be entertained, but at the same time, it's like I want to kind of know why you're writing this piece and why is the right time to pick this out or use this as a sample. Because we want people to read your sample and not just leave and say, oh, that's a good writing. But then you want them to think a little bit about, like, why did I just read this and it won't leave my head for the next 2 days? And that's how you end up getting the project made or get staff in a room or have somebody want to meet with you. I think that's, at the end of the day, the most important thing about you is your experience, your voice, and your personality.
Yeah, I agree with all those points. I think for me, as someone that didn't come out to Hollywood until I was 27, someone that had other careers in totally different fields, someone that didn't go to film school, I can connect with writers and directors that maybe come from different backgrounds, in the sense that maybe they too had lived different lives before they came to Hollywood, before they started writing or directing. I like the idea that someone has life experience or perspective to kind of draw from, because perhaps that makes them better suited to tell more compelling stories. Not to say that you can't be 22 years old right at USC and create the OC or something like that, but like, I don't think for me that I connect with those types of writers the most. I think for me, like, being able to understand, hey, like, you've done something else. You're not just a writer and director. You were a teacher, you were a doctor, you were a lawyer, and then you kind of came back to this, or it's some new calling for you. I really respond to that, and I think that they generally make for better writers and directors.
Yeah, when I'm looking for projects or for writers to sort of send out to people, I'm looking for a point of view. And that manifests in multiple ways. It can be like one character that really sparkles. Because if you can write a character that feels like a person, I can help you with the structure. Like I know how to put a structure around whatever you're trying to do, but I can't teach you that like sparkle. I can't teach you how to sort of capture an emotion in a person. When I read it on page, I get it. So I'm looking for that kind of, that point of view, that thing about that you see the world that you're able to show me. And sometimes it's in the overarching entirety of the story, like, oh, you're saying something really cool with this. Sometimes it's, I don't know quite what you're saying, but like this character jumps off the page. I can just see that person. And as long as you have that, I have something to build around, or like, that's somebody who I send to managers and I'm like, this is a developmental client, but they got something. Like they have that sparkle, they have that thing that prevent, like I read this and it's something about it popped. So just, that's, I think, getting to putting yourself in there, like what, your sample doesn't necessarily have to be perfect, but it does have to have something that makes me sit up and go like, oh, this.
Yeah, reiterating a little bit of what everyone said, but it's such a subjective industry, so it's so difficult to say this is what you should do or shouldn't do, because Dan responds to things in a different way I respond to, and everyone likes something that someone doesn't. So at the end of the day, it's authenticity, right? It's what is your story saying that's just yours purely that I can relate to in a completely different way, and everyone here will relate to in different ways. So I think more than anything, it's what is your story.
And in terms of just like finding people, like from the mass amounts of writers there are you looking at, like, for instance, the ISA has contests. We have the Fast Track mentorship. We have a ton of contests. Are you looking at contest winners? Are you looking at the blacklist? Are you looking at UCB? Are you looking at people who had a short in Holly Shorts? Like, where are you kind of finding that next voice?
I really think it depends on what each person is looking for, because like if you're in comedy, obviously you're paying more attention to comedy, and there's just so much out there that we can't pay attention to all of it. So the most effective way is just to see how many execs and people that you can get to read your script. Because I feel like a lot of anxiety around people stealing stories or stealing scripts. The thing is, y'all, as soon as you write something down, you have copywritten it. Like you don't have to go through the whole process. It is yours. And the one thing I would say about the whole finding your voice, if a story or an idea is based in your voice and the way you see the world, there is not a single person on this earth who can replicate it. Like that's you. If you're putting yourself in there, there's no one else in this world who's as good at being you as you are. So like, okay, you're gonna steal my idea, have fun doing it better. This should almost be the attitude, like that should almost be what you're going in, like my voice matters in a way that that like it really affects the story that I'm telling. So it all just kind of comes down to that authenticity. So how much can you grab somebody to keep them for 120 pages or less?
I work at a boutique management company in Pasadena. I've worked at CAA. I've worked at Writ Large. I've consulted at Netflix. I'm not in the incoming phone call business. No one's like, oh, hey, like, I got this writer that just sold a $1 million. Like, no one's calling me for that. So I'm uncovering every stone. I have complete humility to even go on Twitter and say, hey, I want some reads for the holidays, send me something. And I probably got back to every single writer that sent me something and said, hey, either for me or not for me. So I think, like, yes, I'm personally willing to take a look at any writer, however that manifests. It could be at a barbecue and someone's like, oh, my brother-in-law's a writer. Sure, why not? Because you just don't know. And I think for me, it's like, what is the investment? If I take a look at 20 pages and it's not for me, great. Like, but it's about finding that 1 out of 100 that could become a client, could become someone that makes money, someone that has a viable career. So happy to do it.
I'll say I am in the incoming call business, so I do get a lot of, hey, check out my client, hey, worked with this person, you should know them, which is awesome, but that's also something people talk. So I think Cody said this in the earlier panel, but send your script out to anyone. You don't know who knows who. I think of, in this industry, like, our network is our currency, right? So that's something that you will always be, you always need. It doesn't matter who you know, whoever's reading, just send it to them. I will say, even though I'm in the incoming call business, The amazing director, Alma, is someone who is, I'm just learning so much from her because she will do exactly what you're saying. She will go out of her way to find voices that are completely new. And just to plug in really quick, her nonprofit, if you haven't heard of it, it's called Free the Work. And it's just a database for underrepresented voices. It's absolutely incredible. So she is someone who's always looking for that new voice. And literally the other day she sent me a tweet and was like, hey, here's a story, like what is this? Who are the people that are responding to it? Do we have a writer kind of or story within these tweets? So I just think there's no right answer. Everyone has a different path. So kind of do what you think makes the most sense for you, because I don't know that there's an answer for that.
Do you get cold emails as an exec? I mean, do you get people who are like, hey, I'm a writer? Like, is that something you welcome, or is that, because I know the managers, I'm sure, get cold emails all the time, but I didn't know if as an exec you're like, why are they doing this? Why would they email me?
So it depends what company you're at, I think. Like my previous company, we did not accept unsolicited submissions, so that was a big thing, and I think it's for a lot of legal reasons, honestly, more than anything else. Here, again, because Alma is someone who's just like, you never know where you're going to find that gem, she gets a lot of emails. I haven't yet because I'm still new, but yeah, she sends me stuff all the time, and there are people who have seen her speak at a panel, and they're just like, hey, I loved what you said, like, would love to send you this, and so I get those kind of emails all the time. Not all companies accept them, so just be wary of that, and be okay that companies are saying we don't accept unsolicited, because it is mostly the norm, I think.
I get them all the time. I always look at the log line, and then it has to be really interesting for me to want to take a crack at it. But just on the email etiquette, don't send 10 ideas at once, because we're not gonna. If we see it's too long, we're not gonna waste our time. Like, just send one that you really believe in, and really, like, most of the time you only get one opportunity to get somebody to read you. So really think about what you want to send, what really represents you, and showcase you the best in the marketplace. So keep that in mind. I don't know how this ties into anything else that we talked right now, but I just feel like if you're not in a writer's group, you should create one and find your peers. This is a business of collaboration. You'll always hear about jobs from your friend before your reps for most of the time. So believe that. Like, go, and that ties into everything we talked about earlier too. Like, be nice to people, read each other's work, give good notes, and you'll do okay.
She might be mad for me saying this, but Anch actually sent me a script, and that person is now a client, so you never know.
Send all your notes. Send all your scripts to Anch.
And then in terms of submissions, I'm open to reading whatever. We did put something on our website that you kind of have to fill out this paperwork, but I'm not really like tied to that. But yeah, what David said is totally true. Like, if you send me an email and you're like, hey, David, it's like, no, fuck off. Like, I'm not gonna read your shit. Like, you didn't take the time to like actually like be like, oh, you're sending it to Dan Seco. Like, like, why would you put yourself in that position to like blow that shot? Like, just take a breath. Don't copy and paste 1,000 fucking emails. Like, really just, like, make a concerted effort. But don't also like be like, oh, hey, like, I love this movie that you produced that like is a 2 on Rotten Tomatoes. Like, that doesn't work either. So just, I don't have a film that's a 2 on Rotten Tomatoes. I don't think.
He took his name off.
But yeah, really just put in the time. Just 50 great emails are better than 1,000 copy paste jobs that are messed up.
Yeah, just a really quick thing on submissions. You had mentioned a script that's 120 pages. Please make it less than 120 pages, because I feel like most people will open up a script, and if it's over 120 pages, it's probably not getting read.
That's your max.
Yes.
Max number.
Okay. In terms of selling a project, okay. You write a TV pilot, you write a feature, you've done your notes, you've gotten all your friends being like, this is great, you did great, it's ready. How do you sell a project? How do you do it? I mean, there's people in positions, staff writers, there's people who get on the blacklist who are in a bit of a different position because they're being seen and they're in they're connected to more people. But I mean, if you are a starting out writer and you're like, I know this is good, how can you sell? I mean, what do you recommend to people?
Well, in our next book, we will. That's such a complicated question because there's no one way. It's you are now Sisyphus and you have written your own boulder and you are shoving it up the hill and hopefully building a team that's going to shove it up the hill with you. And that looks so different depending on the project. Luck. There's so much luck involved in this industry, y'all. Like, just, I know one of my friends who's now an EP and getting his own shows. The reason he started out as a writer was he happened to sit next to a showrunner at a bar, recognized that showrunner, talked to him for 2 hours, and then was like, by the way, I am also a writer. And that showrunner went, what do you have for me? Emailed the sample because he had that sample ready to go and was working for that, was a staff writer within the next week.
So would you say that luck is a lot of opportunity meets preparedness?
I mean, the thing is you can prepare all you want and you may never get that lucky break, which is like the heartbreaking thing that we don't really talk about in this industry is you can do all the prep work and if it just doesn't work, it doesn't work. And like there's no answer, but then maybe one day you do need to be prepared. Like you absolutely need to be prepared to walk through that door when it's open, but like he couldn't have predicted that he was gonna sit next to that showrunner. That's a completely lucky thing that just happened. So, you know, build a really strong team of support around yourself is probably the most effective thing you can do. People who won't lie to you, who will give you real notes. Trust your managers, and when they give you notes, if you don't understand it, keep asking questions because eventually you'll figure out what the note is behind the note or how it worked for you. But like, build your support team and trust them because they're there for you in a way that nobody else in this industry will be.
Yeah, so I think there's two ways to approach this question. So for everyone out in the audience that isn't rep and you feel like you have a script that's worth selling that people really want, I think that's a good kind of like heat check to be like, okay, it's time to get a representative. So say I sign someone, right? Maybe they don't have an agent yet. You know, it's developing, it's getting it ready, it's a million reads, it's a bunch of notes. Once it's ready to go out, and again, this is just my strategy at a boutique management company, it's about putting together a list of maybe like 30 to 40 places that make sense. If they've never read you before, I think the bar is a little bit higher in terms of, okay, it's got to be absolutely undeniable. If they've loved something else of yours, and this is maybe something a little bit outside the box, you can kind of still go to that exec, but really be like, hey, you know, this probably isn't for you, but you love the last thing that they wrote. And then it's, you know, like, it could be a week, it could be months, it could be someone randomly came across your script off of Twitter and they want to attach themselves as director and then their agency's going to package it. Yeah, that happened this year.
We're going to end on this. How would you define a writer's voice? How would someone find their own voice, and what do you recommend to people who are like, I can write anything, but I don't know what I am in this industry, what I bring to this industry?
I mean, I don't know, I just think everyone has a story, right? Like, whatever that is, there's definitely a story that you have experienced that no one else has. So I think it's finding that story. For me, I feel very lucky because my story, I'm from Singapore, I'm from India, I grew up in Singapore, and so for me it's like, oh, my story is very external, but I think, again, the writer's job is so difficult because you have to know who you are, which is like the hardest thing, which I think is, you know, the human condition. We're all trying to figure it out. But dig deep, go, like, write down your life story, go to therapy, talk to your friends, like, figure out what is that little thing inside of you that you're like, no, this is mine. Like, no one else knows what it is, no one else understands what it is. And yeah, whether it's external, what I see, or internal, or your family story, or your friend's story. Like, if you're the writer in your group of people, like, tell their story, why not? But yeah, I think there's so many ways to you know, get there.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think there's a lot of different ways that a writer can be great. I think for me, what I look for, I really want writers that can do great character work. But I also love a script that, say, even if it is over 120 pages, that I can sit down and knock it out in 30 minutes. That kind of gives me that feeling that it's a movie on the page. And that's tough. That's really tough. I mean, there's some writers that are world builders. There are some writers that write great action. I think for me, it's like, does it feel like a film? And do the characters really jump off the page? And do I really feel something? Like, I want an emotional response from any type of script. It doesn't really matter what the genre is. I have to feel something. And if I don't, like, maybe it's good writing, maybe it's a good story, but maybe it's not a film.
I'm nothing to add to that.
I personally like stories that tell me something from like a perspective that I wasn't considering, or highlight something that like I would overlook normally. So taking like a mundane situation, but then being like, look at it like if you were 5, or something like that, where you're kind of invited into somebody's way of seeing the world, which is so different from my own, because that's fascinating. You can draw someone into that, and you can get someone to a place where they're emotionally connecting with people who they would either not normally associate with, or a situation that they wouldn't usually be in. But you can really ground it for them and make it real and have that emotional impact. Like, that's what people are looking for. And again, you can do that through either character, but like, I just want to hang out with this character. I don't really care what this character does in certain ways. This character is fascinating, or like, this story is compelling. I need to see the end of this story. So yeah, and that's all just rooted in your point of view, and who are you creating for me to access your point of view into this world. It's pretty cool.
Amazing. Give it up for our panelists.